To the place called the Pools of Bethesda.
Selamat datang di tempat yang bernama Kolam Bethesda.
Now, first linguistics. Can you make a difference between Bethesda and Bethsaida?
Ya, saudara bisa bedakan antara Bethesda dan Bethsaida?
Yes. Two differences.
Ya, jadi berbeda ya.
In English, it sounds a little bit similar,
Di bahasa Inggris nampaknya seperti sama,
but in Hebrew, totally different.
tapi Bethsaida dan Bethesda sangat berbeda dalam bahasa Ibrani.
Beit in Hebrew is place or house, house or place.
Bet dalam bahasa Ibrani adalah tempat atau
Now
rumah.
here, it's the house of mercy or place of mercy.
Jadi Bethesda itu adalah rumah atau tempat kasih karunia.
Chesed, Beit Chesed, Beit Chesda. So H, with strong H, Beit Chesed. Okay?
Ya, Bethesda.
That's mercy. That's here.
Jadi ini tempat atau rumah kasih karunia.
And remember where we saw the River Jordan a
Saudara
few days
ingat,
ago?
saudara melihat sungai Yordan 2 hari yang lalu
In the area of Beit Saida.
di daerah Bethsaida.
It's just in English there is no tse. In Hebrew there is tse, but in English there is no tse.
Bahasa
So
Inggris tidak ada
they put diphthong there.
tidak ada diphthong.
But Said is fishing or hunting after some kind of animal.
Jadi seperti kayak memburu binatang atau berburu
Okay.
hewan.
Now, the story that happened here at Bethesda is only described to us in one place.
Jadi apa yang terjadi di Bethesda itu hanya tercatat dalam satu tempat di Alkitab.
And it's in John chapter 5.
Pak, Yohanes pasal 5, belum tolong baca.
Okay, so we can read from 1, chapter 5, from the beginning, from
Ya, Yohanes pasal 5,
1 until 16.
ya, 1 sampai 16.
Sometime later, Jesus went up to Jerusalem. Have you noticed that we always go up to Jerusalem?
Saudara ingat bahwa kita seperti naik terus ke Yerusalem
Because we're a little higher in the mountains.
karena agak tinggi di atas gunung.
Okay, for one of the Jewish festivals.
Sesudah itu ada hari raya orang Yahudi dan Yesus berangkat ke Yerusalem.
Okay, now why would Jesus go to the Jewish festival and not to the Christian festival?
Ya, mengapa Yesus pergi ke perayaannya orang Yahudi dan bukan orang Kristen?
Because
Dia orang Yahudi.
Because Jesus was not a
Jews.
Christian.
Karena
Yes.
Yesus itu bukan orang Kristen.
Yes.
Ya,
Now that's confusing, isn't
itu
it?
bingung ya.
So Jesus was a Jew and he was not a Christian.
he's
Jadi,
he's
Yesus
a
itu
Jewish
orang
Messiah.
Yahudi,
Yes.
tapi dia bukan orang Kristen.
That
Dia
just does not sound right, right? Well, but you can understand that they were no Christian festivals per se yet.
Ya, pada saat itu belum ada perayaan agama Kristen.
Because Christian festivals connected with the life of Jesus happen after his death and resurrection, right? So there is no.
Perayaan-perayaan yang Kristen itu adalah merayakan Kristus sesudah peristiwa kenaikannya.
It doesn't say which Jewish festival, but usually if it does not say which festival, usually it's the festival. And what is the festival? That's the Passover. Usually in.
Ya,
in
jadi
one
kita
festival.
tidak tahu pada perayaan apa itu peristiwa ini terjadi.
Okay. Pascha, right? Passover.
Ya, seperti masih teka-teki.
Now there is in Jerusalem near the sheep gate. Now, somewhere here was one of the gates of the city that was called the sheep gate.
Ada tempat di sini yang disebutkan sebenarnya adalah gerbang domba.
That did not survive,
Sampai hari ini tidak ada
Okay.
ditemukan.
but
Tapi
it makes sense that the sheep would be brought to Jerusalem. Why is that?
jadi domba-domba itu akan dibawa ke Yerusalem.
What do we need sheep for?
Mengapa kita perlu domba?
Kurban.
Korban.
Yeah, sacrifice, right, in the temple. Okay, and so they will bring the sheep here, and it says there was a pool.
Jadi mereka akan membawa domba ke sini dan kemudian di situ ada kolam.
Now, the English word pool is not a very good choice for translation.
Jadi bahasa Inggris kolam itu sebenarnya bukan pilihan penerjemahan yang tepat.
I'll tell you why. Because when we say pool in English, correct me, we have a connotation of a swimming pool.
Ya kalau kita bicara mengenai kolam, maka kita akan berpikir mengenai kolam renang.
But it was not a swim. Nobody was swimming there,
Jadi
right?
ini tidak ada orang berenang di sini.
Can we use a different word, maybe in English, for that reservoir
Ya mungkin seperti tempat penampungan air.
or water collector?
Ya jadi tempat penampungan air.
And in Indonesian, what would be the word?
Dam. Ya, saya call it
Dam.
dam.
Dam. Okay. All right. Okay. Remember, you and me, we visited the water yesterday at the city of David at Hezekiah's tunnel. Remember?
Ya kita melihat air kemarin di kota Daud.
That was the only source of water in Jerusalem,
Dan itu hanya satu-satunya sumber air di Yerusalem.
and Jerusalem was growing big, and it was not enough.
Jadi Yerusalem itu menjadi lebih besar dan air itu tidak akan cukup.
So they collected, the residents of the city collected the rain water,
Jadi kemudian orang-orang itu seperti menyimpan, menampung air hujan.
and there were a number of reservoirs or collectors.
Jadi ada banyak seperti tempat-tempat setiap daerah itu tempat-tempat orang penampungan air.
Remember, we saw a big one yesterday, the pool of Siloam.
Kita lihat kemarin kolam Siloam.
Okay, this is another one.
Ini juga ada penampungan air yang lain.
The pool of mercy,
Jadi
Bethesda.
kolam kasih karunia Bethesda.
Okay, so the rain was collected here. The
Jadi air
rainwater was
itu
collected.
ditampung di sini karena rendah.
Mostly for the sheep to feed them with water and
Yeah.
watch them.
Khususnya itu untuk persediaan buat domba-domba.
Okay, verse number 3.
Kemudian ayat 3.
Here, a great number of disabled people used to lie: the blind, the lame, the paralyzed.
Dan di serambi-serambi itu berbaring sejumlah besar orang sakit, orang-orang buta, orang-orang timpang, dan orang-orang lumpuh yang menantikan goncangan air kolam itu.
One who was there had been an invalid for 38 years.
Sebab sewaktu-waktu turun malaikat Tuhan, dia langsung ayat 5 ya, ke kolam itu dan menggoncangkan air. Barang siapa yang terdahulu masuk ke dalamnya sesudah goncangan air itu menjadi sembuh, dan apapun juga penyakitnya. Di situ ada seorang yang sudah 38 tahun lamanya sakit.
When Jesus saw him lying there and learned that he had been in this condition for a long time, he asked him, "Do you want to get well?"
Ketika Yesus melihat orang itu berbaring di situ, dan karena ia tahu bahwa ia telah lama dalam keadaan itu, berkatalah ia kepadanya, "Maukah engkau sembuh?"
"Sir," the invalid replied, "I have no one to help me into the pool when the water is stirred. And when I am trying to get in, someone else goes down ahead of me."
Jawab orang sakit itu kepadanya, "Tuhan, tidak ada orang yang menurunkan aku ke dalam kolam itu apabila airnya mulai goncang."
So so the conclusion that we can draw is, for some reason, this water is being stirred every once in a while,
Jadi air itu kadang sekali-sekali itu kayak tergoncang.
and then if you first, you got to be first. If you're first to jump in the water, you will be
Jika
healed.
engkau adalah orang pertama yang melompat ke air waktu air tergoncang, maka engkau akan sembuh.
Okay, all right, okay. So now Jesus showed up.
Kemudian Yesus muncul.
What would you expect Jesus to do to this poor guy who was paralytic?
Throw him.
Precisely.
Orang lumpuh ini kasihan, dia nggak bisa lompat.
Remember, he was paralyzed,
Dia lumpuh,
and he could not get into the water by
jadi dia
himself.
nggak bisa lompat ke air sendiri.
So somebody else would like to use the opportunity. You got to be first. Remember. So
Karena ingat bahwa engkau yang harus pertama lompat.
and the guy could not do that because somebody else would jump ahead.
Jadi dia harus ditolong karena dia nggak bisa lompat sendiri.
So Jesus, being a good Christian, we decided that he was a Christian now.
Yesus adalah orang baik karena menolong orang
What
baik.
would a good Christian do? Help him in the water.
Jadi apa yang orang Kristen baik, buang dia ke air.
However, as you probably know, Jesus didn't do that.
Dan saudara tahu bahwa Yesus tidak melakukan itu, tidak membuang dia ke air.
Now, make no mistake. He healed him, right? He helped
Dia
him.
tidak tahu bahwa Yesus menyembuhkan dia.
But he did not put him in the water, right?
Jadi tapi Yesus tidak membawa dia ke air.
What did Jesus do to this poor paralytic
Jadi
guy?
apa yang Yesus lakukan kepada orang yang kasihan sekali tidak ada.
Actually, nothing. He didn't even touch him.
Bahkan Yesus tidak
He
menyentuhnya.
didn't do anything to
Dia
him.
tidak melakukan apa-apa.
What he did, he just spoke, right? He
Yang
spoke
Yesus
to
lakukan
him.
hanya ngomong aja.
He said, "Get up, pick up your mat,"
Dia katakan
Walk.
bangkitlah, berdiri.
and at once the man was healed. Okay. Now, it's a little bit of not clear why we have the story of the water being stirred and Jesus is not using this water to heal the guy.
Ya, jadi saudara mungkin kita nggak jelas kenapa air itu bergoncang dan kenapa Yesus tidak memakai hal bahwa siapa yang lompat pertama tidak menggunakan air ini untuk menyembuhkan orang lumpuh ini.
Now, we think we know the answer now because of the excavations that took place right here.
Jadi saudara lihat seperti ada penggalian di sini.
And what the archaeologists found, they found a statue of the pagan god, Greek god of healing.
Ya, jadi saudara
Oh.
waktu penggalian ini ternyata ditemukan ada patung yang disembah oleh orang Yunani dan patung itu dipercayai menyembuhkan.
In other words, it was a shrine, a healing shrine dedicated to the god of
Jadi
healing.
dengan kata lain sebenarnya ada patung yang dibangun untuk seperti menyembah patung dari dewa Yunani itu di sini.
We even know the name of this god, Asclepius. You don't have to remember it, but there's a name for this
Ya, ada
god.
nama dari dewa yang menyembuhkan dari Yunani itu dan patungnya dibangun dan sebenarnya ini kayak penyembahan yang bersifat bukan rohani sebenarnya.
And this is not the only pagan temple dedicated to this god that has been found in Israel. The others.
Jadi ada banyak sebenarnya patung-patung yang dibangun untuk menyembah pada Allah-Allah lain bukan hanya di sini tapi berbagai daerah di Israel.
Especially around the Sea of Galilee where the pagans lived.
Khususnya daerah Galilea karena banyak orang-orang kafir tinggal di situ, orang-orang yang menyembah berhala tinggal di situ.
Okay, imagine now
Bayangkan sekarang,
that if Jesus would be a good Christian and
jadi
take
kalau
him,
Yesus itu adalah orang Kristen
this
yang baik.
paralytic guy, into the water, right?
Ada orang yang perlu bantuan untuk melompat ke air.
Then to whom the credit will go?
Jadi kalau dia disembuhkan, pujian kepada siapa?
To the pagan god.
Kepada
Yeah.
Allah dari orang yang disembah, dewa-dewa disembah oleh orang Yunani.
And obviously Jesus did not want to do
Dan Yesus
that.
tidak mau penyembahan itu kepada ilah-ilah lain.
On the one hand, but on the other hand, he wants to heal the poor fellow.
Tapi dia menyembuhkan orang lumpuh ini.
Okay, now I have another tricky question.
Saya ada pertanyaan buat saudara.
The first tricky question was whether Jesus was Christian. Now the second tricky question is this paralytic guy that Jesus healed. Was he Jewish or was he Gentile?
Oke, pertanyaannya, apakah Yesus itu orang Kristen? Yang kedua, yang orang lumpuh ini dia orang Yahudi
What-
atau bangsa kafir?
What do you
Gentile.
think? What do you think? Based on what you just said.
Ya, apa yang terjadi? Maybe
Yesus orang Yahudi.
ya orang Jesus is Jewish. How about the
How about the paralytic?
Orang lumpuh?
The paralytic. What
orang
was
Yahudi atau Gentile?
what was paralytic? What
Orang
was
itu,
he?
itu orang Yahudi.
Jewish?
Okay, all right. And-
The first 10.
Okay, all right. But then the question can be asked, what is this Jewish guy doing at the pagan temple?
Ya, kemudian pertanyaannya, apa yang dilakukan oleh orang Yahudi ini di daerah yang dibangun untuk menyembah ilah-ilah lain?
I think you're absolutely right that he was Jewish.
Mungkin dia dulu ada orang Yahudi.
And think about it, if you are paralytic all your life,
Engkau seperti lumpuh sepanjang hidupmu.
wouldn't you like to use any kind of
Ya,
opportunity
mungkin
to
saudara
get healed,
kemudian
whatever
pergi
it
ke
is?
dukun, cari alternatif lain.
And what we read in the next verse, we can
Selanjutnya,
see this quite interesting. The day on which this miracle took place was Shabbat.
Sabatnya.
Okay. And so the Jewish leaders said to the man who had been healed, "It is Shabbat, the Sabbath. The Lord forbids you to do what?"
saya puji.
Ayat 2. Dan pada saat itu juga sembuhlah orang itu, lalu ia mengangkat tilamnya dan berjalan. Tetapi hari itu hari Sabat. Karena itu orang-orang Yahudi berkata kepada orang yang baru sembuh itu, hari ini hari Sabat dan tidak boleh engkau memikul tilammu.
To carry the mat, right? To carry the mat. Now, if this guy was a Gentile, a Greek or Roman, the Jews would not care about that.
Yeah.
Okay? They wouldn't care. He can do whatever he wants because he is not Jewish. He's not under the law. He can do whatever he wants to do. But
Ya kalau dia orang Yahudi, maka orang Yahudi nggak peduli, terserah kamu melakukan apa saja.
But definitely here, we have the Jewish element that comes in, and they ask the question. By the way, notice one interesting also
Perhatikan
detail.
hal yang ada satu detail yang penting.
They don't credit the Jewish leaders. They don't criticize him for healing. They say the law forbids you to do it. To carry your mattress.
Ya, jadi Yesus itu tidak dikritik dalam hal dia tidak dikritik dalam hal kesembuhan, tetapi dia dikritik dalam hal mengangkat tilam.
So can you heal on Shabbat or can you not? What do you
Boleh
think?
sembuhkan pada hari Sabat? Boleh.
You have to quote me the law that says thou should not heal on Shabbat.
Ya.
Yeah.
And there is no law like this.
Tidak ada sebenarnya hukum yang mengatakan tidak boleh menyembuhkan pada hari Sabat.
There's just none.
Tidak ada.
Okay? What you are not supposed to do
Apa yang nggak
on Shabbat? No. Well, but in general, what
Ya,
you're
secara
not
umum apa yang
supposed
nggak
to
boleh
do
dilakukan pada hari Sabat?
is work.
Bekerja.
Okay? And now you have to define what is work.
Nah sekarang saudara harus definisikan apa itu bekerja.
Don't know, maybe it's work for you, not work for me.
Bagimu itu
Right?
pekerjaan,
So
bagiku itu bukan pekerjaan.
That's the
Okay.
leaf number.
right. Now in Israel today,
Yeah.
okay, Judaism is an official religion
Ya,
here.
jadi Yudaisme itu
Okay.
agama yang resmi.
Okay, so what do you think today, the Jews, do they heal on Shabbat or they don't heal on
Oh, nah
Shabbat?
sekarang kalau orang Yahudi sekarang apakah mereka menyembuhkan pada hari
no.
Sabat?
Well, how come you just said that the law forbids you to?
Like in the hospital,
Yeah.
they cannot stop the medical.
Oh, absolutely, you're absolutely right. So all the hospitals are open
Ya, jadi kalau rumah sakit tetap jalan, nggak mungkin berhentikan
on
pengobatan.
Shabbat. So you have to define what is work.
Jadi saudara harus definisikan
Okay,
apa itu
and also
bekerja.
there's another moment that you have to agree. The rabbis will say whatever saves a life
Can.
is more important than to keep the Sabbath.
Ya, jadi yang lebih penting itu seperti menyembuhkan orang
For example,
daripada memelihara Sabat.
Can you fight the war on Shabbat?
Apakah saudara bisa berperang hari Sabat?
Can.
Yes. Can.
Actually, there was one episode when they tried not to,
Ya, jadi ada masa di mana mereka nggak boleh berperang pada hari Sabat.
when the Jews were fighting against the Greeks
Waktu orang Yahudi harus berperang melawan
about
orang
150
Yahudi
years before Jesus.
sebelum Yesus.
They didn't go out to fight on Shabbat. Guess what happened?
Mereka tidak berperang pada hari Sabat. Ya. Mereka akan kalau mereka tidak berperang mereka dibunuh.
And since that time, they said, this is not going to work because the enemy will know that if we don't fight on Shabbat, they will attack us.
Ya, jadi kalau tidak berperang maka saudara akan dibunuh.
Notice when the last attack took place in this war on holiday, which was Shabbat. And they were successful. We were not prepared. Okay, so this guy was Jewish,
Jadi orang ini
right?
adalah orang Yahudi.
And he was at the pagan temple
Dia ada di
waiting for.
seperti kuil
The
yang,
water.
menyembah kepada
Now, how would Jesus know that this guy paralytic, right?
Bagaimana itu tahu orang ini?
That he is Jewish? How would Jesus know?
Bagaimana tahu itu orang ini orang Yahudi?
I mean, obviously Jesus knows everything, right? But you see what happened is that this fellow would have an outward sign of his
Ya,
Jewishness.
jadi orang ini mempunyai tanda di luar yang untuk mengenali bahwa dia orang Yahudi.
In other words, in his dress
Dalam cara dia berpakaian
would be something that would identify him as Jewish.
dan cara berpakaian itu kemudian dia dikenali bahwa dia orang Yahudi.
What do you think it is?
Apa yang menandakan bahwa dia orang Yahudi?
The tassels. Okay, the strings,
Jadi kayak ada kayak yang putih-putih itu bergantung. Ada
which is mentioned in Numbers 15.
dalam Ulangan pasal 15.
Let me
Jadi
review.
saudara lihat kemarin ada orang Yahudi jalan nih, ada gantungan benang di depan belakang.
Numbers 15, verse 38. The Lord said to Moses, "Speak to the Israelites and say to them, throughout the generations to come, you are to make tassels on the corners of your garments, with a blue cord on each tassel. You will have these tassels to look at, and so you will remember all the commandments of the Lord. Then you may obey them and not prostitute yourself by chasing after the lust of your own heart and eyes." It's Numbers 15, verse 37.
15,
It's towards the end.
37.
Ulangan.
Bilangan.
Oh, bilangan. Ulang tadi.
Numbers 15, verse 37. Yeah, 1-5.
37.
37.
Oke. Tuhan berfirman kepada Musa, "Berbicaralah kepada orang Israel dan katakanlah kepada mereka bahwa mereka harus membuat jumbai-jumbai pada punca baju mereka turun-temurun, dan dalam jumbai-jumbai punca itu haruslah dibubuh benang ungu kebiru-biruan."
What's the word for tassels?
Apa? Jumbai.
Jumbai.
Okay, because the word tassel is not a good word. It's just an English trying to sound similar to Jewish.
Jadi
To Hebrew.
dalam bahasa Inggris itu tidak tepat
In
karena
Hebrew,
coba mencari
it's-
kata yang pas sesuai dengan Hebrew.
Tzitzit. Tzitzit.
Sit.
Tzitzit. Okay, but in English there is no tz sound.
Oh ya.
Okay, there is no tz sound, so English is struggling with that.
Jadi bahasa ini bergumul untuk
So they found the word that just sounds similar to Hebrew. Okay, but it's good. That's all right. That's all right. It's imagine this. They had the ancient people. They had a tunic, right?
mereka pakai kayak jubah,
And they had pants. They had
ada
tunic,
celana,
and then they had something that would look like a poncho.
ya.
Okay, the outer garment. Okay, and at each corner of that poncho,
Ya.
you will have those strings.
Ya, kayak jumbo-jumbo yang bergantung-gantung di baju di belakang.
They're not functional. There is no special function for
Tidak
it,
ada fungsinya sebenarnya.
except religious to
Hanya
to
untuk-
remind you of the Lord.
Jadi untuk mengingatkan engkau Tuhan, dan itu tanda bahwa mereka
And so most likely this paralytic
kemungkinan orang yang lumpuh itu
was because he was Jewish, we
karena
said,
dia orang
right?
Yahudi, dia pakai itu
He
jubah-jubah
was
itu.
wearing those tassels on his outer garment, outside, right?
Di jubah luarnya dia memakai itu,
So Jesus could see it.
dan Yesus bisa melihatnya.
And he could see this Jewish guy at the pagan temple by
Jadi dia bingung
the
kenapa ada orang Yahudi
pagan
berada di
statue.
kuil yang adalah bangsa yang berhala,
And that would trigger his interest.
dan itu yang menarik perhatian Yesus.
What is this guy doing here?
Kenapa orang ini ada di sini?
Oh, this guy. Well, look, he's paralytic.
Oh,
He
orang
is
lumpuh.
paralyzed, and he's waiting for the
Dia
water.
menunggu air bergoncang.
What? Waiting for the water. Well, why all this pagan stuff? Get up, pick up your walk, your mat, just walk.
Bangsa penyembah berhala berdiri.
Okay. And another thing is interesting that tells us that he was Jewish also. The next verse there in Joshua 5,
Yosua pasal 5.
verse 14. Joshua 5,
ayat 14.
14. Later, it says, Jesus found him. Now, who is him? The paralytic.
Jadi
The
Yesus menemukan dia, siapa dia?
Ex.
Orang lumpuh.
ex-paralytic. He's not paralytic anymore. He's healed now. Okay.
Dia sudah disembuhkan.
Jesus found him at the temple.
Dan Yesus menemukan dia di Bait Allah.
Now, what is the temple? That's the Jewish temple, right?
Apa itu? Itu adalah Bait Allahnya orang Yahudi.
What do you think this guy was doing in the Jewish temple?
Mengapa apa yang orang ini lakukan di Bait Allahnya orang Yahudi?
Any idea?
Begging?
No.
Praying.
Actually, he would give thanks to the Lord
Iya, dia mengucap syukur kepada
for
Tuhan
his healing.
untuk kesembuhannya.
Okay? How do you do that? You bring sacrifice, right? You bring
Ya, ucapan
sacrifice.
syukurnya dia datang ke Bait Allah.
Because you want to attribute your healing to whom? To God
Ini
Almighty.
seperti memberikan ucapan syukur kepada Tuhan karena kesembuhannya.
And where can you do that? Where can you bring the sacrifice? Only at the temple, to the Jewish temple, which is just across the road.
Membawa persembahan itu ke bait Allah orang Yahudi.
Okay, now here's an interesting detail
Ada sesuatu yang menarik di sini, detil yang menarik di sini.
that is not in the text here, but it was a practice
Tidak ada di teks tapi ada
2,000 years ago.
ada dilakukan beberapa tahun yang lalu.
According to the Jewish regulations now, again, there's
Ya.
certain regulations.
Sesuai dengan peraturan Yahudi.
Have you noticed that there is a general rule, like you should remember the Sabbath and keep it holy, so you're
Yeah.
not supposed to work, but then you need to define what is work.
Ya, jadi kayak contoh ada peraturan umum. Kamu harus menghormati hari Sabat, tidak boleh bekerja, tapi kemudian kita harus definisikan apa itu bekerja.
The same thing here. You have to define certain regulations concerning the sacrifice,
Jadi saudara juga harus seperti ada penjelasan mengenai pengorbanan.
and the regulations were that the blind, the lame, and the paralyzed were not allowed to get into the temple.
Ya, jadi orang-orang itu tidak diizinkan masuk ke bait Allah.
Okay, so that's interesting that this paralytic was not in the temple, probably never in his life, or at least for 38 years, because he was paralyzed for
Ya,
38
karena
years.
orang sakit tidak boleh masuk ke bait Allah, dan bayangkan bahwa orang lumpuh ini dia lumpuh selama sekitar 38 tahun, dan jadi seumur hidupnya dia nggak pernah masuk ke bait Allah.
So the first thing he does, right? The first thing he does,
Yang
he
pertama dilakukan adalah
wants to do something that he couldn't do for 38 years.
jadi dia melakukan sesuatu yang dia tidak pernah lakukan selama 38 tahun.
He rushes to
Dia berlari ke bait Allah
meet with God of Israel
untuk berjumpa dengan Allah Israel,
and to give him thanks for his healing.
untuk mengucap syukur untuk kesembuhannya.
Okay, all right. And that's where Jesus met him.
Kemudian di situ Yesus berjumpa dengannya.
Okay. And what he said to him is interesting. There's just one
Apa yang
sentence
dikatakan
there
kepada dia menarik,
in verse 14.
ayat 14.
See, you are well again, so stop sinning, or something worse may happen to you.
Kemudian Yesus bertemu dengan dia dalam bait Allah lalu berkata, engkau telah sembuh, jangan berbuat dosa lagi supaya padamu jangan terjadi yang lebih buruk.
Okay, so remember that this guy, this fellow, was paralytic for 38 years.
Jadi bayangkan orang ini lumpuh selama 38 tahun.
Would you like to be paralyzed for 38 years 2,000 years ago?
Saudara, kalau 2000 tahun yang lalu saudara mau lumpuh,
I would not like to be
saya
paralyzed,
tidak akan mau menjadi orang yang lumpuh.
right? Because there was no hospitals, there was no special facilities.
Tidak ada fasilitas.
Even
kursi
today, I
roda.
don't want to be paralyzed for 38 years.
Bahkan hari ini saya juga nggak mau jadi orang lumpuh.
Okay, so he was in a really bad condition, right? He was really
Jadi
suffering.
orang ini sangat menderita.
So what can be worse than that?
Apa yang lebih buruk dari itu?
Jesus said something worse can happen to you.
Jadi karena Yesus mengatakan kamu bertobat, jangan lagi berlakukan yang sama karena kamu hal yang buruk lebih buruk
What,
terjadi padamu.
what do you think can be worse than
Apa
that?
yang lebih buruk akan terjadi kepada orang ini? Selain lumpuh.
Anything?
Hilang keselamatan.
Lain.
Well, you see, I think with this paralytic been for 38 years, it's the maybe it's an ultimate expression of earthly suffering. You know, like blind, like paralyzed, like leprosy. You know, it's something. He's at the bottom. There's nothing in this life that can be worse than this.
Ya, jadi hal menderita puluhan tahun atau sakit kusta adalah penderitaan yang tidak
But
bisa terbayangkan
what can be
pada
worse
masa
than
hidup.
this
Apa yang lebih buruk dari itu?
can happen in the life to come.
Jadi itu bisa terjadi pada masa kehidupan masa
In other
mendatang.
words, what can be worse than this?
Apa yang lebih
Now,
buruk dari itu?
notice that for 38 years, he couldn't get into the temple. Also, he could
Jadi
not
bayangkan 38 tahun dia nggak boleh masuk bait Allah.
worship God in the temple, right?
Dia tidak bisa menyembah Allah dan bait Allah.
And what can be worse than this
Apa yang
is
lebih buruk dari itu?
eternal separation,
Jadi
forever
jadi yang
separation.
lebih buruk ini Yesus
from
sedang
God,
mengatakan bahwa
right? So in other words, not
penderitaan kekal.
the earthly suffering anymore, but kind of suffering
Mungkin
forever,
Kamu
right?
akan
For eternity.
telah menderita penderitaan di dunia, dan yang lebih buruk terjadi adalah penderitaan dalam kekekalan.
And the eternal separation from
Dan
God.
kemudian perpisahan yang kekal dengan Allah.
And what can separate you from God for eternity. What is it?
Jadi apa yang memisahkan engkau dari Allah dalam kekekalan? Apa itu?
Well, you guys know. I'm preaching to the wrong crowd. You know what that is.
Saudara tahu itu ya?
That's the sin. That's
Yeah,
exactly
dosa.
right. Right? I mean, we know, but that is something that Jesus wanted to focus the attention of the people of his time.
Ya, jadi Yesus sedang menekankan pengajaran ini kepada orang-orang yang mendengarnya.
You can see he's using the Jewish regulations and Jewish traditions
Dia menggunakan tradisi Yahudi dan hukum-hukum Yahudi
to explain to them what can separate them from God
untuk
forever.
menjelaskan apa yang akan memisahkan mereka dari Allah.
And that's the sin. And we know who can deal with the sin. There's only one person who can deal with it, right?
Dan hanya satu orang yang bisa menyembuhkan.
And that's the Messiah, Jesus, himself. Again, I'm preaching. You know that. I'm sure, right? But that was something important that Jesus wanted to focus to his Jewish
Jadi itu hal yang penting yang Yesus sampaikan untuk orang-orang.
compatriots. All right, so that's. I thought that it might be helpful to.
Yeah.